All right, gang, lab report number 2 here. As I mentioned for lab report number 1, but I'll assume that you didn't see it. The whole point of the lab report is not necessarily to provide you with concrete answers to some of the questions that you have, but to give you things to think about so you can use those on your own path moving forward with your health, wellness, physical, financial goals, whatever it is that we are helping you out with. So today, first of all, I'm going to start this by saying my 60-pound pit bull puppy is in the room. Okay, so you might hear him. You might hear me tell him to stop licking, chewing at his butt. But those are things that might happen in today's episode, and this will come into play later. And if it happens, I'm going to correct him, and then we're going to get right back to the action. The first most important book that I ever read in PhD school was this little bitty book. It's called The Philosophy of Science, a very short introduction, and it is by Samir Okasha. And this book at Purdue was taught to every single PhD student. And what it gets at in this book is that as researchers, as scientists, the scientific method is often what gives us the concrete objective data that we use to make decisions, move forward, and analyze the world that we live in. And some place like Purdue is an R1 institution. There is a high value placed to high quality research and having objective measures and outcomes. If you think of Purdue, you think of engineering, you think of mathematics, you think of very binary type things. However, before you get to any of those objective measures, there's a series of things, thoughts circulating around in your subconscious brain, maybe your conscious brain, that ultimately whirl around in there. And at some point you decide, I'm going to research this, but you didn't objectively measure or evaluate the quality of those thoughts, or you didn't rank them on a scale of 1 to 10. You just felt this inspiration, like this passion to research this thing that was pretty subjective, or maybe even floating, out there. Genius, like the word genius, is actually like a Latin word for spirit, right? It's like a guiding spirit. So when people say, he's a genius, it's not really even an objective compliment, right? It's a subjective compliment. So that's pretty long-winded, but the question, the why are you here in the first 2 minutes is, how does this philosophy of science affect you from objectively achieving your goals, whether they're financial, whether they are physical, whether they are personal, emotional, relationship-wise. It doesn't matter if you're using a path and a plan to achieve those goals. So we have this kind of this two heads, or the two sides of the coin here, which are, we have the philosophical beliefs and we have the execution. Right? So the philosophical beliefs of what we're doing, why we want to go, what the goal is, and then we have the execution, which is the steps to get that goal achieved. There's the pit bull making a bunch of noise. Look at him, he's at the door, probably wondering what the kids are doing. Anyway, right back on track. So another way to look at it is, we have these great ideas, but how do we get to great outcomes? How do we get to great execution? And a lot of times we lay out a path for ourselves in the goal setting process and set these pretty rigid standards and objective measures to get to our goal, right? We give ourselves our own informal scientific process and series of steps that we want to take to get to this objective measure outcome. All right, so you think in terms of financially, I want to make $100,000 more this year than I did last year. Here's how much I need to make more each month. It's $8,000, by the way, if you're curious. And here's what I need to do daily to make that happen. If it's, I want to lose 25 pounds in 5 weeks, I got to lose 5 pounds a week. Here's what I'm going to do daily to lose my roughly 0.86 pounds a day, right? What happens oftentimes and not, though, is we lay out this, in some cases, very meticulous plan. And I've worked with, back to engineers, I worked with a lot of engineers, or highly analytical spreadsheet type people that lay out a meticulous plan to achieve their goal. And what happens is, somewhere along the lines, they fall off. They either don't have enough discipline, or something comes up. Whatever the reason may be, they don't adhere to this plan and they fall off the wagon. Okay, so real easy example is, I have this fat loss goal, and I'm on the dating app. I get a date. I go out to have sushi with this date. That's still part of my plan. I end up having a really good time on this date. And not only do we have dinner, we have some drinks. Then we decide we're gonna have drinks afterwards, right? And next thing you know, I've had like 6 beers, 2 shots of tequila, and that really wasn't part of the plan. On Saturday morning, I sleep in. I miss my gym workout. I lay around all day Saturday and I actually exercise. And by the time Monday rolls around, I feel like I've had 3 days of complete and utter failure. Okay, so I don't attack Monday with the same vigor. I'm a little defeated. I have some like emotional or mental like dip, or maybe it's like an emotional high. My date was so great, it was so good, and I don't. The fitness thing's not important. This person was so awesome, right? And so maybe you get derailed, and for whatever reason you don't get back on track of your goals, and you just fall off and you just stop. Okay, well, pop culture wise, people will tell you just need to exercise grace, give yourself some space, have some self-love, right? And I don't think that's actually helpful in any way. And if you would like me to use terms that are like culturally acceptable right now, I'd say, okay, if you want to give yourself some self-love, right, then actually what you should have done in your fail-proof plan is set some boundaries, right? That's actually self-love, right? You could have given yourself space within this goal to operate and to account for errors, right? So for example, the very beginning of this cast is, hey, my pit bull's in a room. There's a good chance he's a 60-pound, 2-year-old dog. He's gonna make some noise and disrupt this thing, okay? But instead of hitting stop, starting recording again, trying to get back in flow, I'm just gonna address it and we're gonna move right back on. And that's exactly what happened. He's an excellent helper. He didn't even know he was gonna help by being a nuisance, right? So if you have those fail safes built in, you're going to be able to stay on track at a much better rate, okay? If you know that, I'll give you a good example. When I work with a lot of my Jack Dad, Fat Dad clients, okay, that program is more mental than it is physical. Like, we're addressing all the things that are gonna come up that are preventing you from hitting these objective measures, right? To exercise so many times a week and to lose so many pounds. For example, in that program, if people are drinking 2 to 3 times a week, people often underreport that, by the way, that's statistically proven. But let's say they're like, yeah, I drink 2 or 3 times a week, it's casual, da da da. I automatically assume they drink more than that, and maybe it's not so casual, but I'll tell them, okay, great. I'm not asking you to stop drinking. Here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna drink on one night. It's Saturday, it's Friday, it's Tuesday, it doesn't matter. You're just gonna identify it. You're gonna put a boundary in there, okay? And what's the boundary? And they get to pick it. Maybe the boundary is, I can only have drinks from 6 to 10 p.m. Or my drinks are these 2 drinks, whatever. There's a boundary in there, right? So we're not setting an unrealistic expectation, right? We're just giving them some parameters to work in. And that probably is more accurate to what this very odd self-love concept is, right? We're giving ourselves boundary. If we stick to those boundaries, we're gonna be A-okay. And I put another fail-safe in it. If we go beyond that boundary, that's okay. The next day when we wake up, regardless if it's late, whatever, we're right back on our plan, okay? We're getting right back on it on Saturday, whatever it may be. We're doing the next best thing for our objective outcome, okay? But humans are such subjective creatures. We have to give space for error, right? And to keep moving forward. I've referenced it once, I'll reference it again. The Jack Dad, Fat Dad program, it's a play on Rich Dad, Poor Dad, okay? And Rich Dad, Poor Dad was a book, you should read it, but it's all about mindset. It's not, it's about money. That's the outward facing part of the book, but it's really about mindset, right? And you have to change your mindset to get this objective feedback, right? I also would like to make another point here. As we're closing on 10-minute mark, I told you guys before, if you don't remember, the goal with Lab Report is to have them to be under 20 minutes. But if you you lay out a meticulous plan, okay? And that plan can be laid out. I've worked with clients that have laid these out in over a few cocktails. Some of them have gone to like a deep meditative state. Some of them have used altered states of consciousness to really figure out the plan, okay? And sometimes they come back from this altered state of consciousness, which alcohol is an altered state of consciousness. But so they may have their spirits and libations, they might have had their whatever they have for this altered state of consciousness, and they come back to this state that they normally live in. And now what prevents them from staying on that brilliant path or going down that brilliant path that they laid out? Sometimes it's fear. They're like, God, man, that was just the best plan. Problem is, I was just a little too drunk when I thought about it, and it's scary, right? And there's a great, this is actually in the last one that I wrote about. I don't think I podcast this, but there was a great quote, and I believe it's Michael Jordan retirement or it's an Adidas commercial, but it was, fears like limitations are often illusions, right? So back to this psychology of our goal setting and how we achieve things, the fear and the anxiety is often the worst part. Very rarely does the worst case scenario happen when you're imagining a scenario. I mean, think about that in your life. There's plenty of situations you thought were going to be terrible. They end up being really not that bad, right? But you let the fear and the hesitation and the trepidation of it all slow you down and prevent you from getting on your path to achieve your goals, right? We all know that Jocko has the discipline equals freedom, right? And I subscribe to that theory and that belief, but it's not always realistic for people that are just starting down this journey or who have had lots of ups and downs and trouble adhering to the discipline that leads to the freedom, okay? So one of the things that can help you is to build in these fail-safe systems, right? That helps with this interplay between your philosophy and your execution. Right? I'll say that again. You need to build in a fail-safe system that helps you when you're struggling between the philosophy and your execution. Okay? You have to be realistic. And realistic doesn't mean not setting scary goals. It doesn't mean not setting big goals. It doesn't mean taking your foot off the gas. Okay? It just simply means give yourself some leeway so that you can have this long-term success and objectively be able to measure that success, because that's what you're after.